Hello and welcome to WorldCFMMusic. I'm excited to bring this video to you guys. I have my good friend Gerald, who happens to be a pastor as well in the city of Socorro, New Mexico. And I've been able to observe him playing guitar in the Albuquerque church as well. You might have watched my previous interview with Joy with the piano. They both played in song service together. It was an excellent song service team, still is. Even after their departures, but just in being able to go to a number of their church services, a variety of different events, I was able to watch Gerald play guitar. I've even seen him a little bit playing guitar for their concert scenes, and he's very good at what he does. And so I've asked him to come and share his knowledge with us, his experience in playing guitar, in hopes that it'll help you guys in learning guitar. Those of you who want to pick up guitar, or those of you who want to get better at guitar, all for the sake of glorifying God, of course. That's the whole focus as to why we're doing what we're doing. And so with that, we're going to get started. My man, Gerald,
What's
I
up?
appreciate you coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man.
Thank you for coming over here.
made the trip. It's not that far away. But yeah, it's exciting because I get to do this in person.
Yeah,
so
man.
First go at it. But hey, man, just to get started, why don't you go ahead and kind of introduce yourself? I know I've given you somewhat of an introduction, but if you would go ahead and give us more of your musical background or your musical testimony, if you will.
Yeah. I started playing guitar kind of, I guess, relatively late, if you were going to, to the world, I guess. I started when I was like 14, and I didn't really know. My dad taught me a couple of chords when I was like 9 or 10, and I wanted to play the Iron Maiden licks and stuff like that. And so I did that for a little while, but I never really got seriously into it. But it was funny because one of my friends in the church, he had came up to me when I was like 14. He's like, "Hey, let's just start a band. Let's just do it." Yeah. And I was like, "Okay, what do you want me to play?" He's like, "Guitar, you play?" I was like, I don't play. And so I was like, "All right, sure." And even my dad, I was my dad, "I'm going to be in a band." He's like, "What are you going to play?" "Guitar." He's like, "You don't know how to play guitar." But that's how I started, is just to join a band and do something for God. And that's how I started, and just been playing ever since. So yeah.
Cool. So you saw a need, or you were challenged,
and
you stepped up to the plate.
Well, yeah, my friend was he was very anxious. He wanted to do something, so I was like, okay, I'll try it. We'll see how it goes.
That's cool.
So
man.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest things that I believe many face in churches, is getting people who are willing to rise up and say, I want to be involved. I want to do something for God. So that's awesome. I'm sure you know that, especially being a pastor. So it's like, yeah, you always want people who are willing to do something for God. But so even, you already mentioned one of the challenges. You said you felt like you started a little bit late. Mm-hmm. But what were some other challenges that you faced when you actually started picking up the guitar and learning?
Frustration in general, because I think when you pick up a guitar and you hear so many other people and how they play, and you picture yourself being able to play that right away. But there's a long process. I mean, like, even down to, how it hurts your fingers. You get frustrated. You can't play the chords. You feel like you're pressing so hard on the strings and there's nothing coming out, and you're just like so frustrated. So that was the first big hump I had to get over. And then you always see other people that are drastically better than you, and you see it and you're like, you put yourself down. You could put in there, oh, I'm never. And it was getting past those things. I think the biggest thing for me is trying to just like, you know what, I'm just gonna do it just because I want to play. And if it sounds good, it sounds good. And I'm gonna practice so it does. And if it doesn't, just keep trying to get better, and just keep working at it. So I think those were the two biggest things, was just getting over the frustration as you begin, because I think that's where like 90% of people who set out to learn guitar, they stop at the very beginning because it's so frustrating. Yeah. I think so. That was the biggest thing for me, and then obviously just trying to get out of my own head. So yeah.
I mean, it is hard.
Yeah.
Learning an instrument is hard. I mean, there are people out there who we call people talented, and they can pick things up fast, but it still takes effort to learn these instruments, even for those who may not have, quote unquote talent.
Absolutely.
It's still going to take work, for either person. And even those who are talented, if you want to be good at that instrument, it's still going to take that work. And so, but you mentioned, it was really interesting, is the challenge of comparison.
Yeah.
Looking at other people and being like, but they're so good.
Yeah.
But it's it's encouraging to hear that, because it helps the viewers, those who want to learn, to keep the main thing.
Right.
And saying, you know what, I'm not doing this for someone else to critique
Right.
my guitar playing.
Exactly.
Whether or not they do, I'm
Yeah.
doing this because I want to glorify God.
Exactly. Yeah, that was a big thing, is just like understanding why you're doing it. And I think that's what helped me push it, push past it a little bit, is just, ultimately you just do it for God, and it'll work out.
So then on the other side, the physical side of things,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned the challenge of, finger calluses, just doing the hard work. How did you get past that initial discouragement? What did you do to get past that?
So like I said, I started when I was like 9, and I stopped playing because of that. Like I couldn't play Joe Satriani when I was 9. So I was like all frustrated, so I stopped playing. But then when I picked it up and I had somebody pushing me, like, hey, we got to learn this song, we got to do this, I was like, you know what, like just push past it. And it was, just keep going. It was my thing. I was like, it may not sound great at the moment, but just keep going. And I watched other people play. This when I was younger, when I was 14, like I didn't have as much access to like YouTube and stuff like that. So I tried to listen to music and try to like zone in and just really just stay locked in on what I wanted to do, because I had a band that was like ready and willing to play, and I didn't want to be the one holding it back. So I'm like, just push through it, just figure it out. And so definitely having a passion behind it helped, because it wasn't just like, oh, I can just quit. No, I couldn't, because there was like people wanting us to do something for God. And so so I'm like, okay, I committed to it, so let's do this and let's do it right.
So the focus of this, of course, is reaching out to those who want to learn guitar, who want to get involved in their song service or even concert scenes. We already mentioned the discouragement factor.
Right.
And you've already covered, working through things. But if we were to specifically focus on someone who's barely learning the guitar, they were coming up to you and said, Gerald, I admire your guitar playing. I want to learn guitar. I want to be in song service one day. Mm-hmm. What would you tell them to encourage them to get to that point?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, having good resources when you start out, because I think a lot of people, they set out and they're real scattered. I want to learn something, but I don't know how to learn it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to look here, I don't really know who to go to. But my thing is, there's so many resources out there. So on the physical side of it, use those. Like the first thing I'll tell somebody is like, hey, like look up YouTube. And it's funny because I know Joy said it in the last interview. That's what's awesome about this channel is like, hey, if you want to learn song service, go to this channel. Because you can learn the very beginning basics. So that was my thing is my thing rather, is just staying, using all your resources that you can. And whether that's I joke around, I don't know any music, I don't know any like sheets or like, how to read music or anything. I learned off of YouTube.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
So you weren't professionally trained to play guitar?
No, absolutely not. And
you played a really good song in Albuquerque.
Yeah, they're all chords, man. They're all simple, G, C, D, and so that was perfect for me. I'm like, oh, this is great. I don't.
And you lead songs in your church now and
like
play guitar.
Like I said, they're G, C, D, E minor. It's not the notes, the clef. I don't even have to deal with all those things.
So it's possible, is what we're trying to get at.
That is true.
It's possible.
That is a big thing. I think
focus,
don't let the I guess all the information get you so down.
The professional world.
Yeah, because I mean, there's going to be people that say you got to do this, you got to learn all these things, and honestly, there's no like one way to like learn the guitar. I think like for me, if I would have stuck to that like sheet music, all that stuff, I would have never learned. I think just finding a passion for it and how you do it, if you start learning, then that's great. And especially for the kingdom of God, like, that's where it's, we're not going to be asking people to do. I've never once been, hey, can you tell me what this chord is, or you need to know this? They'll explain it to you, and then all right, let's pick it up, let's go. So I think a lot of times, especially with musicians, it can be daunting, like a daunting task. Like I got to learn all this. It would be nice, work at it, set a goal, but don't let that get you down. Like I think that's a huge thing. That was a huge thing for me, at least.
So Another thing that came to mind is you mentioned at the beginning you weren't a Joe Satriani. For those of you who don't know who Joe Satriani is, very good secular guitarist.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, I said keeping the main thing.
Yeah.
A brand new guitar player, for me as a brand new drummer, I wanted to take off. I wanted to do all the fancy stuff. I wanted to do the rolls and the fills and the very complex drum patterns. But I realized that doesn't really fit well in a song service setting.
Yeah.
So what would you tell a beginning musician to focus on in order to keep the main thing?
Yeah. I think you need to have a practice, like you need to be practicing on your own time. Because I think people who, they learn something and they're like, oh, I'm going to try that for song service. Well, that may not necessarily work. And I did that all the time. Okay. When I played bass, I would do like every run. And I like looking back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was probably super annoying. And so like, but but that was the only time I ever played bass. So I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. I'm going to keep doing it, But I think having a passion for the instrument in and of itself. So you play the guitar for God, for a song service, that's awesome. But when you're at home, you play that stuff that you want to play. You get, you kind of and start learning that stuff, because you can do that for a band, for the concerts. Like you can use it, it's just not for the song service. Okay. Like keep the song service in its place. Like regular chords, they're not asking anybody to be, super talented and super out there as far as you're playing. So just, I guess channel it somewhere else. If you want to be in a band, use that. If you really want to play something like that, hey, start a band. Do something for God with that as well. But like you said, keep song service, because that's the anointed place. Like that's the place that needs to, where it's exalting God and not yourself. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. And it's just, I'm guilty too, where I would, in song service, I'm just trying to rip these rolls. And I'm like, I have to blast, and a stick goes flying. I was like, oops. Literally.
Throwing picks in the crowd.
I've thrown sticks before, man.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to stress, especially to new musicians, get those basics down. Yeah. And learn to just kind of stay in what we call the pocket, right? Yeah. Just play those chords, play what you're supposed to play, and save that, like you said, save the other stuff for another time. Yeah. It's hard to do. Especially when you're really learning. I'm so guilty.
It is.
In talking to Joy, she's like, song service is not the place to do all these fancy stuff.
That's who I think of. Her and Dominic Padilla, Pastor Padilla in Waco. That's who I think of when I remember myself playing bass. I'm like, oh man, they probably just wanted to kick me off so many times. And rightfully so.
So get started on the right foot. For those of you that are barely getting started, just stick to the basics. Know what atmosphere you're playing in. Yeah. And keep the focus on God. Just remember when you're playing that instrument, I'm doing this to glorify God. You're helping your song service team to establish the presence of God, and that will only benefit the entire church, because they can keep their focus on God and be prepared to hear the preaching. So
absolutely.
Yeah, that's good stuff, man. You mentioned, we've gone over the beginning aspect, but there are people out there, and I'm sure you've had experiences of your own in this area, but what I call plateauing, right? Yeah. You have this plateau, you're climbing this mountain, you're improving, you're getting stronger, and then it just flattens out. Yeah. You're like, wait, there's more to improve. Have you ever gotten to that point where you're like, man, my guitar playing is horrible. I just want to get better, or just kind of boring to you and you want to improve on it?
Absolutely.
How did you get past that?
That happens all the time. I think if you play, and I think you can agree that if you play for any period of time, you get frustrated, you want to create a song, and you always start with the same key, or you always start with the same note, and you find yourself playing the same rhythm. And especially like in song service, I think that's kind of a little bit different, because they have a set pattern, there's a rhythm that they want you to keep. But if you're playing the instrument, which you should be on your own, to learn more, I think go and look and find something that you're not necessarily playing at the moment. So like for me, I started and all I played was metal. All I played was rock music on the side. And so like our band, that was all it was. And so I got frustrated. I was starting, the band sounded the same, blah, blah, blah. So what I started doing is I started learning blues. And I started learning like jazz chords. Because those can be, that can push you into another area where you're like, okay, I can go here and now I can learn this. And you're learning a different type of music, but you can also fuse that with your other stuff,
Yeah.
and you can fuse it with song service. You can fuse it like, and you kind of start learning gradually. And I think for me, pushing myself to learn things that I didn't know and that were out of my comfort zone was really big for me. It's just like, okay, you're stuck in a place, you're stuck in the same type of music. Okay, so venture out a little bit. Try to find something and try to challenge yourself a little bit. So I think that was probably the biggest thing for me, was venturing out, branching out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's good. I mean, when you really back into song service, it's easy to just kind of cop out and be like, well, I'm just playing song service chords.
Yeah.
But even biblically, you look at, in the Old Testament, the Bible refers to skilled musicians.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with being good, knowledgeable, gaining
Right.
a lot of experience at what you're doing.
Right.
Because it could only benefit, and when it comes to experience, we're not just talking about being able to play these awesome solos and do these fancy things on guitar, but experience in the sense of knowing how to play as a team.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Knowing what your role is.
Yeah.
It's not just I'm playing my chord when I'm supposed to play it.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on, and I think that's something a lot of unlearned musicians or beginning musicians fall victim to, is just focusing on your part.
Absolutely.
Versus
yeah.
looking at the big picture.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so
Understood.
what is on the heels of that? What have you learned in regards to being on a team?
I think number one, doing your part and not kind of really trying to take over, doing your part, but also hearing other people out, I think is a big thing. I think like when I was younger, very immature, and it's like, no, I'm set in my ways.
Yeah.
Like, well, you don't play guitar, so what do you? And so that's just, and I don't know, maybe it's just me, but that's just like the mind for me. I was like, okay. But honestly, listening to people, because they can give you insight, and even though it's a drummer or a keyboardist or the song service leader, they're saying something for a reason. They're trying to tell you something for a reason, and it helps you improve. Okay, well, you're not playing the right style, or you're not playing the chord. There's the piggyback chords. Pianos. And so, well, you're playing the wrong one.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
the
split chords, and you're like, oh, you're playing the wrong one. No, I'm not. And you play it, and you're like, absolutely, you are.
Yeah.
And so, people point that out, and so really just listening and kind of setting the ego aside is a big thing. And it's not just like I just still do it all the time. You have to get at it and be like, look, listen to people.
Yeah.
Let people speak into your life and help, because that'll help you tremendously in just in what you're doing, but also in the song service, and just kind of have one vision, one goal, understand that we're all trying to get to the same place. We're all trying to make sure that this song sounds good, make sure it's presentable, and that way we can serve God, and that we don't have the guitarist, ripping a lead, and it's not only is he not supposed to do that, but it's also terrible, so just kind of making sure you're on the same on the same pathway as the rest of the team. And just look, we're doing this for God, and find that and remember that as you're doing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So there are pastors that watch this channel too, for which I'm very grateful. You're a pastor. You recently got sent out.
Yeah.
It's been what, over a year now?
No, about 8 months. Yeah.
Almost
yeah.
a year. Okay.
Very young, very new to it.
Yeah, and so you have quickly begun to understand the challenge of carrying a lot of the load, in the sense of you are the song service, from what I know,
right?
And then you got to preach and do that stuff
Yeah.
afterwards. So you play and lead, right? Or
Yes.
You play and lead song service.
Yes.
Is there anything that's been kind of eye-opening to you from a pastoring standpoint that's like, wow, this kind of changes the game? I was used to just standing on the stage and playing guitar. Now I got to play and sing. And how does that factor in?
My biggest thing was I can't look at my notes all the time.
Okay,
Because as a song service leader, you kind of have to make not make eye contact, but at least let the people know you're not just sitting there I will praise the Lord.
Engage. You got to engage with
Let's
the people.
praise God as you're staring at your tablet. Somebody actually told me that for a revival. They were like, hey, you probably should look up from your tablet a little bit. And I was like, man, I should. Because there's all kinds of elements you don't think of. And I think not only because it was uncomfortable for me. I don't sing. I am not a singer. And so, but that's what I need to do. So I'm going to do it. And so I'm uncomfortable. And so my safe zone was the tablet. And so, but you got to realize there's a bigger picture. You gotta get people engaged. You gotta get people to start feeling the rhythm so they can actually clap. Because especially if you don't have a drummer. It's it's mind-boggling, man. It's hard because they're like, what rhythm? Where do I clap? It's hard. I don't even know, sometimes. And so realizing that there's not just you and your guitar and your singing. You got to find the bigger picture. You got to realize that you got to do other things as well. Letting your keyboard player know, your singers know. There's all kinds of things to it. So, not just getting it captured into your safe zone where like, okay, I'm getting nervous, so I'm just going to look at my tablet the whole time.
Yeah.
So you gotta venture out, gotta do your responsibilities.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That's good. I mean, I sing and lead. I lead song service and play guitar also. Yeah. And I believe I mentioned this before. It was a big challenge.
Yeah.
When I first, and I was like, I'm a musician. I can play instruments and I can do this. And I pick up a guitar. I try to lead. And I'm like, oh man, I'm in trouble.
Those chords just start running off the page. I'm like, wait, this song's not moving that fast. It's a slow song.
Or you start smashing chords and trying to look up. And, it's just rough.
Yeah.
But it's possible. It's one of those things, like you mentioned before, you just work through it, begin to practice. I don't know how many are watching this that you are in the position where you lead and you play, or you just play an instrument and you sing at the same time. Yeah. To some people, it comes naturally. To others, not so much. But it's one of those things. It's possible. You just got to practice. Set some time aside and work through those things. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, one of the more practical things is, what advice would you give for the maintenance of your instrument? Guitar is different in the sense of a keyboard.
Yeah.
Unless you're dealing with a live piano, an acoustic piano, it doesn't need to be plugged in. That's a different story. But I would dare say most of our churches are plugged in on their keyboards.
Yeah.
Guitar is a little bit different. I should say really different. Yeah. So what would you say to people in regards to maintenance and caring for your instrument?
It's an investment, so you want to take care of it, and I think like this guitar back here is my dad gave it to me. It's a very nice guitar, but if I don't take care of that thing, it's gonna be dusty. It's gonna be it's gonna lose tune. It's not gonna sound good, even though it's a great instrument. You can abuse it and it can not sound good through a myriad of things. So, number one, keeping it in a good place. You can't keep a guitar in super hot or super cold temperatures because of the wood on the neck. It'll warp. You'll lose tuning. There's all kinds of things that happen when you don't take care of a guitar right. You want to make sure that you're constantly changing your strings. So I'm not as extreme as a lot of people are. Professionals, they change them every time they play. People who play it, wherever they go or for concerts, I used to change them probably once every 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
Now it's more like once a month, just because they lose playability, they get dirty, they lose tone, and it's a total difference when you play dirty strings and when you play clean strings. It's like so comfortable, and as you probably know.
Right.
It's so comfortable when you have a new set of strings and you're like, oh man, this is great.
They're not just shiny,
they sound good, they feel good. You feel like you can fly all over the fretboard. But yeah, it's changing your strings, just going especially if it's an electric, go get it set up professionally. They do a lot of things that I don't even know, like they adjust the neck, they do things with the pickups and stuff like that. And so they make sure your pickup height is correct, because a lot of times if you have problems with your volume, your pickups aren't at the right height, or one's too high, one's too low. So it seems like it's a daunting thing, but if you just go take it, they'll take care of it.
Music store.
Yeah, and like the one person I started patterning that after was actually kind of recently. We were at the men's rally in Phoenix, and Pastor Lamb came from Las Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
And me and Pastor Day and Pastor Lewin were there, and he walked in with his guitar, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, And so Pastor Day had told me basically he has one guy that he takes his guitars to, and I think it's either in Phoenix or in Prescott. Okay. I can't remember. But I was like, man, that's cool, because he takes them, he takes care of his instruments,
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I really need to do that. I really need to make sure that it's taken care of, because it's an investment, especially if once you're starting to get better and you make an act. I mean, they're costly, so you want to take care of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they totally are.
Yeah.
In bringing this to a close, all these questions just start coming up,
Yeah.
but outside of the scripted side of
Yeah.
it, but in Albuquerque, if I'm not mistaken, you guys had a rhythm and a lead guitar.
Yeah.
Would you, just for the viewers, would you clarify the difference between the two?
So what Pastor Padilla now, he's in Waco, what he always used to tell me is, for rhythm, you keep the rhythm as, the bass and the drums, you keep a solid rhythm. And it's more like a riff, not like necessarily a lead, because I think leads, you're like, if you put him in that category, it's like, okay, you kind of think of Van Halen, Stevie Ray Vaughan kind of thing. Right. But really it's kind of just fills, like it fills and riffs. And the big thing for that is where you can lose what your responsibilities are, I remember Pastor Padilla telling me, never play riffs like while somebody's singing, while there's vocals. Like pick your spots, and like you can do fills, make it sound better, add a little bit more. And I don't know if that's a hardcore rule, but I thought that always was nice because, especially if the volumes are too loud, you don't want to be dominating, you want to be standing out, but they have you doing that for a reason. So pick your spots, and as long as you're not, overpowered and dominating the whole song service, pick your spots, find a good riff that you have and kind of, but know what you're playing first, because but that was a big thing, was just picking your spots for leads. But rhythm is really, I think that's one of the most neglected things for a guitar player is rhythm. People spend so much time on learning scales, learning all these things, which is good.
The fun stuff.
But rhythm is so important. It is like, man, you can know everything in the book. If you don't know how to find a rhythm, that was me, like when I first started, like I said, with metal, you don't really need rhythm. And so I remember I was with my cousins and they're super talented and they're like, let's jam, and so I got up there and I was playing guitar and they were like, Zach, my brother, he's like, how about you jump on? And I was like embarrassed, man. My ego took a hit, man. But it was because I didn't have any rhythm. I didn't know what to do, man. And you're trying to play a jam session, or you're trying to play with a song service, and you're over there like pounding away at the chords. You got to find a rhythm. Pay attention to your rhythm guitar. Like, pay attention to how you play, how you pluck the strings. Pay attention to rhythm. It may be boring, but it is like 90% of it almost. I think it's a really big part of it.
So it's good because when you listen to a song, even a mainstream song, with secular Christian radio, whatever, and you really listen in, that constant tone that you hear that supports the music is all your rhythm instruments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Constant strumming of a guitar.
You're laying your bass.
All these things. It's like you like to hear the stuff that pops, but without the underlying rhythmic side of it, that stuff that pops wouldn't carry much weight.
Right.
And so it's good to play rhythm. It's important to understand it, and it's okay. It's not all about being the lead or being the superstar of the show, especially in song service. It's not the focus.
Yeah, exactly.
But Well, good. I'm glad you clarified that, because it's really good to know. I mean, overplaying, getting really excited about certain things, it can be dangerous.
Yeah.
It's good to be excited, but learn to guide it. Learn to have that direction. So.
Zone it in.
Reel it in for
absolutely.
Sure. Well, that's all I have for now. I'm sure I could ask you a ton of questions. Just in watching this guy, he can play. I'm like, I want to play like you. So, but thanks, man, for doing this interview.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
So with that,
boom,
we're gonna bring it to a close. And you guys are welcome to ask any questions. I do have, contact with Gerald. So if you have questions for him, you can post it in the comment section below. You're also welcome to send me an email at worldcfmmusic@gmail.com. You can also go to the website where there's some resources. There's some printable PDFs. There's song service sheets from the last conference. You're welcome to go and check those out as well. And the website address is worldcfmmusic.com. And so with that, thank you guys for watching. Again, thank you for doing this interview, and we'll see you guys on the next video.